Welcome to the Global Citizen Life podcast. Today on the show, we have Mikkel Thorup. Thank you very much for joining us today, Mikkel.
My pleasure, Sally. Happy to be here and looking forward to our conversation and hopefully help and inspire your audience a little bit. Yeah, should be good.
Mikkel, you are a fellow Canadian like myself, but no longer living in Canada. And you are the founder and CEO of Expat Money, which is helping people come up with their plan B, diversify, move abroad, get those second citizenships and residencies and things like that. What what made you start to want to do this? What made you think that, Canada might not be the place for you to stay forever?
Well, for my story, I have to go quite far back in time, but I'll try to make it as quick as possible. So when I was a child, I was actually diagnosed with a learning disability. And the teacher pulled me out of class one day and sat me down in a little room. And there was the principal and a resource teacher and maybe the vice principal or something like that. And they sat me down and they said, Mikkel, something doesn't work quite right in your brain. And what we want to do is send you to a special school for special boys. So that's what they did every year, Sally, for three years. I got on a little white bus and I took a little white bus across town and I went to some quote unquote special school. Only problem was it was not a special school, it was a special class in a regular school. So you can probably imagine what happened. I got in a ton of fights and I got picked on and bullied, and it was all around a pretty horrible experience. Anyways, after 3 years, I finally got to go back to my neighborhood school and I was so excited. And I thought, oh, my friends will have been missing me and everyone's going to be wondering what happened. And, you kind of show up after 3 years and everybody, you think everyone's going to be so excited, but you can probably guess what happened. Everyone starts gossiping and whispering. And, oh, I remember Mikkel, he went to some retard school. Thanks, guys. Very, very kind. You know how children can be politically
Yes.
correct and so gentle. But it left a bad taste in my mouth for public education, for state-run education. And basically, at 12 years old, I stopped going to school, and at 15, I officially dropped out. And not shortly after that, I had an opportunity to travel internationally, and I did that. And when I went overseas, I started meeting all these amazing people and seeing how they learned and did things and how they lived their life. And I was like, wow, this is what I want to do. These my peeps, this is my people. And fast forward to today, and I basically didn't stop traveling. I've been on the road, living internationally for 25 years straight. I've traveled to about 120 countries. I've lived in nine. I built a business around this. And to give you context, I mean, I also do it on the personal side. So I'm Canadian with Danish heritage. My wife is from mainland China. I met her in Germany. We got married in Africa. Our first child was born in Brazil, second in Chile, first in UAE, second in Brazil, third in Chile, fourth in Mexico. So all my kids are born in different countries. We own real estate in 10 different countries. And now I help with my consulting work clients for the last decade at expatmoney.com. And we've run our podcast for, yeah, almost a decade as well. And just really, really love the work and still super passionate about all of these things after even 25 years of doing it. And no, really, really like these things. Now, I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but we can kind of go in any direction you want from there. But trying to, bring in 25 years, or actually, I guess 30
Hmm.
years in 2 minutes is a little bit challenging.
It is, but it does answer it. And I really think because I travel a lot as well, not quite as much as you have, but I really started to realize, like, I used to think I live in Canada. I have to have my bank account in Canada. I can't have bank accounts anywhere else. I have to have my company in Canada because I'm Canadian. This is where I live. And I used to think that that was the only option until back in 2011 when I left Canada and really kind of felt a little bit like, I'll say, like a little bit like a black sheep, because nobody that I knew was really interested in leaving. Like, sure, go on vacation, go for a week, maybe 2 weeks, you come back and that's it. But I wasn't like that. I knew I wasn't supposed to live there. And my first move was to Costa Rica. And that's when I really kind of, as you said, met my peeps, met people and realized, wow, I'm not the only one who doesn't want to live in their home country. And then really started to learn like I can have, even if I went back to Canada, I can still have bank accounts in other countries. I can still have and should have my business in another country where my taxes aren't as high as they are in Canada. And really started to learn all of the things that I know now. But because I was just given the Canadian education, and we always think, well, the West knows everything and we're the best at doing everything. And as I've traveled around, I've really realized that there's a lot of other countries that do things a lot better than we do in North America as a general. There's things that we do better in North America, of course, than others, but it really kind of opened my eyes to there is no one way. And just because we do it doesn't mean it's the right way.
Yeah, I think perspective is extremely important when you start traveling overseas, and especially not just like a vacation, but really spending time in another country and culture, getting to know the people. I mean, if possible, learning the language and interacting with people in their language on their terms, really shows you the arrogance of a lot of Western democracies, and how they need to bring freedom to the rest of the world. And it's like, I've lived all over the place. I've seen things from so many different perspectives. And it's like, I have basically seen that all people are the same. I mean, people want a roof over
Mhm,
their head, they want to be loved, they want to love, they want a full belly, they want to protect their kids. I mean, people are inherently good, after all of these
mhm,
years and traveling and traveling and traveling. I can tell you people are good, and there's no right way or wrong way, as long as you're not infringing on other people's rights. Like, I'm very freedom minded. Do all that you say you will do, and do not encroach on other people or their property. This is my North Star, otherwise known as the non-aggression principle. I mean, as long as you're
mhm.
going with that, I think everything else is fine.
Yeah, I completely agree too, and it really has opened my mind to I've learned that my thoughts and beliefs, they are not right, they are not wrong. They are only mine from part my experience, but also mine because of my parents, my grandparents, my school, my government, my how I was raised, and then questioning those things or learning that there are other ways really makes it better for me and just more open and realizing, wow, what is best for me? What do I truly want? What do I truly believe? And they're my beliefs, not right or wrong again. And so what works best for me? And even though I do love Canada, I think it's a great place in the summertime, not a fan of winter. Have friends and family there, but it's not my ideal lifestyle of how I want to live. And so then from there, it's looking at what do I want? What do I believe? How do I want to live? And then making those plans or choices to visit those places and see what works with me and coming up with some people will say just a lifestyle change. Some people will call it a plan B for maybe, where we are in different chapters of life. We can't always just do exactly what we want when we want, and we have to plan for that. And that's where that importance of a plan B or the future lifestyle that we want and putting those things into place are important. So when you're helping clients with Plan B, what do you find are some of the most important kind of questions that they need to think about to answer for themselves to have the best Plan B? Because I don't like the whole thought of one size fits all. There isn't one plan, one destination, one place. So, what would you ask them or have them think about to decide what works for your client?
Yeah, I mean, we have different levels of coaching. So, we are really focused on kind of what the client needs. So, we do a group coaching program and then a one on one consulting program. The consulting that we do is a 12-month program where I'm taking weekly calls with them for months. So, I really take my time just to get to know the person on the front end. Even an hour ago, I had an onboarding with a new private client, and they had come down to Panama to visit me. I'm located in Panama City, Panama, and they came down to visit me a couple of months ago, and then they decided to engage my services. And today's call was very easy. We just spent an hour just visiting, you know trying to get to know them a little bit. Why is it they want to move overseas? What are they upset about? Why, what are they trying to protect against? So we do a pretty in-depth threat analysis. I don't rush them through things. For example, right off the bat in the first call, he's saying, we don't want to pay any more taxes. We don't want to do any of these things. Do you recommend people renounce their U.S. citizenship? And I was like, no, I don't. I never
That's
recommend that. We've done it for many clients. We help with the legal work with our firm, and I have tax lawyers that help people through it. But it's never something I would ever recommend.
mm,
Why? Because it's an emotional decision. People have a lot of their identity tied up in where they were born. So,
right.
it might make sense on a spreadsheet, but life is more than just a spreadsheet. I am very analytical, but I'm also very emotional. So I'm able to look at both sides of things.
Mhm.
So, I would never jump into anything like that right at the beginning. I want to understand, okay, in this particular case, the client was very unhappy with their government and the government's behavior, and they didn't want to identify as an American as anymore, and they didn't feel proud to be an American. So it's like, all right, well, let's talk this through, and they've got a 2-year time horizon, so we're certainly in no rush, and we will look at these things. But yeah, it's just a friendly kind of get to know each other at the beginning, and then understand what it is that they're trying to protect against. A lot of the work that we do is because of taxes. When we do plan Bs, it's because they didn't like what happened with COVID and government restrictions and taking away freedoms. Mandatory vaccination for children under 6 years old is pretty disgusting. So, a lot of people wanted to move somewhere else where there weren't these types of problems. So, I don't have a like set formula of top 10 questions that I must ask every private client. It's like, no, like, just kind of like chit chat and get to know them. And then they
Mhm.
ask the questions, and I'm able to provide context and information, not just based on, what I read in a blog article or what I saw on a YouTube video. I mean, actually, our company, we're the ones generating a lot of these ideas. We see a lot of people out there copying types of things or repurposing, things, and they say, you know, uh, you know, plagiarism is the most fond form of uh, what's it called?
Like an appreciation,
Yeah,
but
of
there's a different
appreciation.
word
And I'm
for it.
like,
I know what you
I don't
mean.
find that. I'm not very appreciative of this. But no, it's not too structured that way. It's very
Mm.
relaxed and very natural with it. So we just try to help them through the process piece by piece by piece.
And I think with that though, there's two like really important things that you've said is for them to figure out their why, and that's their internal, not rushing into things because policies and politics change, right? There will be another election. Who knows what will happen, which way it'll go. But I mean, and so rushing into renouncing citizenship is a really big deal. And I had somebody recently ask me about that, and I just said, you know what, that's something down the road to think about because that is a big step, and you have to make sure that it's something that you really want to do. And the other part though is, as you said, just because something looks good on a spreadsheet, and I've had people come and they say, I don't want to pay any taxes. Where do I go? Where do I go live? I'm like, well, you want to enjoy where you live. Like, just because you go somewhere and you don't have to pay personal income tax doesn't necessarily mean that that's a place where you want to live. And so we have to think about that because sure, on paper, we can make things look amazing and great and show video clips of how wonderful life will be at this location, but you might hate it. And I've met people. I met somebody from who had moved to Cyprus for low taxes and set things up, and he said it was the worst decision I ever made. And he was from Germany. He's like, I would rather go back to Germany and pay taxes because I hate my life here. I was like, wow, I mean, that's unfortunate that it happened that way. And so we do need to look at the why, what lifestyle do you want? How do you want to live? And then another super important thing is doing those trips, going there, go on a scouting trip, go and don't just do a week vacation because you and I know very well anywhere can be amazing for a week or 2 weeks or even 3 weeks. Like, of course, we can think, oh, yeah, I could totally live here because you're on vacation. You have to live and work and deal with banking and whatever else that you need to do that we have to do, housing, fixing things in our house, all of that type, car maintenance, dealing with mechanics, all of those things are very different than being on vacation. And so it is important of why you want to move, what lifestyle do you want, and then going and checking out various places, even if it's the same country, right? As you know, Panama, you could be in Panama City, you could be in different areas. Do you want kind of weather do you want? If you hate the heat, you don't want to be somewhere that's going to be really hot because you're not going to be happy living there. And within every country, there's a variety of weather conditions and things to do. And so you could pick a country, but you could still pick the wrong place within the country.
Yeah. So it might be interesting. After so many years of doing this, we have never relocated someone and they've either turned around and gone home or anything like that. Because we spend so much time on the front end figuring things out, we've never had this problem. And I always try to slow the process down. I mean, I do have clients sometimes on the very first call, they're like, okay, I want to do this residency or that. And they just want to pepper you with questions. Okay, fine, no problem. I'll always go as fast or as slow as the client wants. But when I try to get to know the client, I'm trying to understand all of these soft things, and then we do a lot of tours at our company. So I just got back from Brazil. I took a group of about 20 people down to Brazil, and we were in the Amazon for a few days, and then we were up in the Northeast in Fortaleza. I actually have a second newsletter called Brazil Beachfront, brazilbeachfront.com, and we talk all about Brazil. And my child was born in Brazil. I used to live in Brazil, so we know it very well. And try to make people realize, okay, this would, if you wanted to live here, this is maybe what your life would look like. Next month we're going to Paraguay, and we've done multiple trips to Paraguay. I think we've got 30 some odd people for that tour. And so I'm actually out there leading the tours, and it's not just about tourism. It's like, okay, trying to really understand as an expat what life would be like there, for investing there, the banking, the immigration, the taxes, all of these things, and then all of the lifestyle side of things. But yeah, you have to take your time,
Mhm.
not rush into things. Even, we do massive amounts of investment internationally, but that is not picking where you're going to live. That might make sense on a spreadsheet, but I'm like, you want to come to Panama? Great. Rent for the first year, rent for the first 2 years. We
Yes.
might buy a property to be able to get you your immigration. But that's just a line item on your balance sheet. Where you're actually going to spend time, that's, can be a lot different.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes people kind of mesh too much of it together. Again, when we think about diversifying and a plan B, we kind of get back to almost as I was that mentality of in Canada of okay, everything has to be here. So now if I'm going to move to Brazil or when I moved to Costa Rica, I didn't think of then having to have all my stuff in Costa Rica, right? Because then you're just moving kind of one basket to another basket, and ideally, and it's okay to have where you are locally, you want to have a bank account, but it's good to have other bank accounts in other countries and destinations. And same with real estate. I've got real estate in Montenegro. I spend some time there. I don't live there full time. It was never my intent. And some people have asked, they're like, well, you've got a place in Montenegro. Why aren't you there full time? And I said, it wasn't my intent to be there full time. I've got property. I go there. I use it. It's an investment and I enjoy it, but I never had that intention of being there full time. And sometimes we have to think about, as you said, the spreadsheet, the bottom line, but then it is where do you want to spend your time? Where do you want to be that tax resident, which you could have residency and spend time in a country, but not be a tax resident. And I think that as well, sometimes people get confused of, well, if I have residents, more than one resident, I have to be paying more than one taxes, but we only pay taxes in the country where we're a tax resident. A caveat of that is Although if you're from the US, you still have to file within the US, but there's a lot of what's the word that I'm looking for? So you're not double tax treaties for with a lot of countries, and obviously working with a tax expert to make sure that you're within that. But I think a lot, unfortunately, people think then they just move everything from one country to another, and that's not exactly what we want to do when we want to diversify.
Yeah, I mean, the basic idea is flag theory. So flag theory
Mhm.
has been around for decades and decades. It was the four, and then it was five, and then it was 10, and now it's like 843. I mean, there's lots of different ways that you can structure things so that it's very decentralized, so it's very international. I think that it is still a very good way of doing things. However, I would caution it is not about diversification for diversification's sake. I have some clients who come to me who've worked with other consultants or other law firms, and they're like, okay, I've got a trust over here that owns this corporation that has shares in this one. And then the beneficiary is this trust. And then the banking is over there. And then it's like, I was like, oh my God, you're making my head spin. And I am a professional and do this for a living and, work side by side with the lawyers all day. And you're making my head spin on this. So, I mean, I have to once again kind of calm people down. And then it's like, okay, what are the goals and what are the objectives? If we understand what are the goals and what are the
Mhm.
objectives, and everything else can fall into place because most people, tracking all the stuff around the world and having it so well structured that they themselves are confused is usually not the goal. So I think that it's very important to diversify up until a certain point. I also
Mhm.
encourage people not to look as me as the model of what to do because I mean, I do this for a living and I've been doing this for 25 years. So I've been building on things. So it's not like you need to, get into this, start binging on our podcasts or something like that. And then, like want to go and do all the things that we've done over an entire career, piece by piece. And every time just take one step towards freedom. And,
Mhm.
every step that you take, you're going to get closer there. But don't get overwhelmed, relax, go in for the long haul and make sure things are done correctly and legally and compliantly on the front end, and you'll be okay.
Yeah, because it is easy to get quite overwhelmed if people are watching a bunch of different videos from different people because different people have recommendations. And even just for you and me, what's working for you, what you've done for as long as you've been doing it may not be ideal for me or for even just for what I want. Right. And like for me, my goal is to have where personally used properties to have three or four different countries. So they're not really rented, but they're my own personal use. And I've talked to people, they're like, God, I'd never want that much. I want one home, one place, maybe a rental, and to diversify other ways, whether it's intangible assets, gold, silver, um, real estate, wine, like there's so many different things, and it comes back to that why, and what do you want to do that works for you, and what position is a person in financially, right? Because having a trust that's owned by a corporation to another corporation to like all of that costs money, and sometimes like it's just not worth doing because you have to think of what do you have, what do you want, and then working that, as you said, one step at a time.
Well, I'll add a little bit more flavor to this. Also, look at what your career is. So, if you are, an obstetrician from California, the likelihood of being sued is extremely high. If you are a retired school teacher and you're living in Costa Rica now or something like that, what's the chances of you being sued? Why? Okay, you want to put it in a family foundation or a trust or a corporation. Amazing. But do we need like structure on top of structure on top of structure on top of probably not. And like you said, there's a lot of compliance, there's a lot of filing requirements, there's a lot of legal work. The more that you add to it, the more complicated it goes. So this goes back to our threat analysis. What are we trying to protect against? I have some people who are very outspoken. I think, if we look at Calgary and what's happening in Alberta right now with secession and stuff like that, I got brought up last year to talk to at a conference of some of the largest landholders in Alberta. And these were extremely wealthy families who wanted to have a plan B because they want to push for succession. And it's like, okay, you definitely need a second passport and another bank account and stuff. We know how aggressive our country is and what they will do and how they will punish people who speak out or protest. So it's like you definitely need it. And these guys are worth, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. And I was brought in to work with them on these things. That's a
Mm,
very different than, once again, a retired school teacher, as an example.
absolutely. And so with as we know, everybody's kind of they're very individualized with what they need. What would you say is kind of the first maybe few things that they should either look at or consider for their personal situation?
I think that in general, and nothing in today's conversation is individual tax, financial, or legal advice. All
Right.
investment contains risk, including the risk of losing your principal and your investment going to zero, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think that it is very, very important that people have three things. Okay, if you're going to look
Mhm.
at the plan B, and I will quickly run through each one of them, and I highly encourage everybody listening today to have these three things. So number one would be immigration. I really recommend having a permanent residency in a foreign country, ideally one that you enjoy spending time in. Now, you want to make sure it's in a tax favorable country. You want to make sure that if you do become a tax resident there, that you're not out of the pan and into the fire. It's best if you're easy to be able to get there. So look at flight paths and everything like that. Japan on the other side of the world, and you have to take 4 connecting flights. And oh yeah, it's a tax hellhole is probably not a good option. But a lot of my clients go north south, so we're looking at the Caribbean, Central America, South America, etc. There are definite enclaves of freedom here. I'm not saying the entire continent is free and safe. You have to be a bit picky and choosy here, but I
Mhm.
think that there are some good options. So, a permanent residency in a country that you enjoy spending time in, that's tax favorable. I look for food, water, and energy independent countries. These are very, very important to me. I lived in the Middle East for almost a decade, and we produced none of our own food and no fresh water. We had to have everything desalinated. And, if anything happened, politically or geopolitically, I mean, it would not have been a good option. So I like
Mm,
green countries. I like countries where I don't need to burn things to stay warm. I like, more tropical climate, let's say, and where
mhm,
everything will grow and lots of rainfall. We're looking at countries that have strong medical facilities and English speaking doctors and organic food and access to the ocean and a whole bunch of things that we might be looking at. And we have a pretty detailed list in for our paid members called the Expat Index, where we look at about 10,000 different data points on 50 different expat countries and we rate them objectively against one another. So we try to get the immigration in these countries. So that's number one. Number two would be when you have this immigration, having a property there, having a place that you can go to, so that you're not trying to get into a hotel or something like that. A actual abode that you can spend time in. Now, what we try to do is make it also work as a rental property when you're not using it.
mhm,
So at least pay for itself. Ideally, make 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% annual cash on cash return plus capital appreciation, which in the countries I work in is anywhere from 5 to 10%. So you take the realized gains of the cash and the unrealized gains of the capital appreciation, you add them together, and you're looking at 15, 18% returns annually, somewhere around there. And then if we can have a lock off closet or something like that, so you can keep a suitcase in there and some change of clothes and some personal effects and things like that, then amazing. And then lastly, I would have an offshore bank account or a precious metals account or both overseas. I think that having funds internationally outside of your home government is very, very important, especially based on the current climate in the world and what we've seen with confiscation and expropriation and things like that by our home governments and freezing of assets. I quite like precious metals. I've been invested in precious metals for decades now. I've done very well. This is real money. It holds value. It retains value.
mhm.
Um, the countries I like working in are going to be very favorable in tax laws and in asset protection laws. So, I mean, we work in probably a dozen different countries, or maybe maybe 8 or 10 different countries for precious metals, but having something there, and then you can also do things so that you can take a loan against your metals in case you need to get access to funds and you don't want to sell it. Selling it would be a taxable event. Taking a loan against your assets is not a taxable event, and then you can pay it back at a lot later time. So at expatmoney.com/gold, we've got a ton of information about different companies we work with and how that all works. But those are the three things that I would definitely have set up: permanent residency in a country you enjoy spending time in, a second home, ideally being able to rent it out for a bit of cash flow, and then an offshore bank account or offshore precious metals, access to funds to be able to pay for goods and services. Make sense?
And I think, yeah, those are definitely key. And we need to start working on those things sooner than later. Because as you and I have both had clients come and say, I need to go now. Like, I want to go now. And it's there's ways that things can be done and people can move quickly, but it is a lot harder. It costs a lot more money. I've said to people, if you want, you can go travel now while working on things, but a lot of times you have to apply for these residencies and things in your home country. So you're going to have to be back at least for appointments and things like that. But it is better to plan now for the future. And then if something or when something occurs, then you have all of those things in place and you can leave. Because when a lot of people want to leave now, it becomes very chaotic, it becomes more expensive, it becomes harder, and mistakes are made because we just do things for I'll deal with the repercussions later. We knowingly and sometimes unknowingly do things that will cause us more problems, potentially more money and more issues in the future. So planning that now for the future is the ideal way to go. And I've always stressed to people, even if you're really not sure what to do, like num I say number one, depending upon the situation that they're in, is another bank account. I always say when I'm on podcasts and things, I'm like, if you don't do anything I say, which is your choice, you don't have to have that, but please just open a bank account in another country. You'll get a debit card for it. You'll have access. There's online banking, because if something happens and your government decides to freeze your account or identity theft happens, like, and you've done nothing wrong, you at least have access to some funds to hire a lawyer if you need to pay your bills, to buy groceries, to whatever you need to do. That other bank account is, in my opinion, one of the most important things. That is kind of an easier, quicker thing that people can do while working towards the other things, is to have access to some cash outside of the country.
Yep, 100%.
So, well, I would love to thank you very much for your time today. And if people wanted to get in touch with you, you have a few different options of working with you. Where is the best place for them to just find you and find out some more information, or to get in touch with you if they want to work with you?
Yeah, 100%. And thank you so much for having me on. If you guys want to learn more about our work, you can go to expatmoney.com. We've got hundreds of articles, almost 10 years worth of podcasts, YouTube, social media. I mean, literally anywhere we are, but I mean, the best place is expatmoney.com. And if you're listening to this show on a podcasting application, then just search the Expat Money Show and it should come up on there. And happy to help your audience and support you guys any way that I can. And looking forward to hearing from you guys. And yeah, come on over.
Perfect. And to make things easy too, I'll make sure that we have links to everything in the show notes, for everybody who's watching or listening to connect with you. And thank you again for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure's all mine. Thanks, Sally.